We have been talking for all of this month on our Sunday morning worships about what are we waiting for at Christmas time. There's a lot of waiting at Christmas, particularly for the kids. What are you waiting for right now? What are you waiting for? Christmas, yeah. And what are you excited about waiting for Christmas? Presents. We're soulmates, dude. You and I, we are cut from the same cloth. That was what Christmas was all about for me. And to be perfectly honest, there's still a lot of that going on in my life that I really love getting presents. And Christmas morning is one of the most favorite times of the year. I love opening presents. I love giving presents. I love the presents. How about you? You love the presents too? Yeah. We're the same. We have presents. You like the presents? Yeah, okay. All right, we just got to be honest. All of the adults would say the same thing too if we gave them time. I always loved waiting because it was such a surprise. I had high expectations because, Santa Claus is magic and his elves can make anything. And I expected him to bring me whatever I asked for because of those things. Very, very high expectations when it came to Christmas morning. As big as that is, and as exciting as that is, and as fun as that is, waiting for the Messiah is an even bigger thing. There were lots of prophecies in ancient Israel about the Messiah. Messiah, the one chosen by God, selected by God to lead God's people and establish God's kingdom on earth forever. Lots of expectations surrounding that. Lots of prophecies surrounding that. And a lot of times, folks' expectations didn't line up with who Jesus, who is the Messiah, what he was actually like and what he actually did when he was living on earth. And that led to a lot of confusion. There were a lot of differences. That's what I've been talking about for the past 4 weeks. If you really want to listen to those or re-listen to those, they're online, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Knock yourself out. Today we're not talking about misunderstandings, though. We're talking about something a little bit different. One of the things they were expecting of Jesus, well, let's just say, what were they waiting for? When they were waiting for the Messiah, what were they waiting for? We're going to look at a couple of scriptures, and then we're going to have a pop quiz. Yeah, you thought you were coming to church to worship, but there's a pop quiz. You will be graded, okay? And if you fail, then nothing will happen. What were they waiting for? In Ezekiel, we're told this, that God says, I will place over them one shepherd, my servant David. And that reference to David is that notion of the Messiah would be a descendant of David. And not that David is a zombie who's going to come back and lead as the walking dead. He will tend them. He will tend them and be their shepherd. Then in Micah 5:4 we read this, he will stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the mighty and the majesty of the name of the Lord his God, and they will live securely, for then his greatness will reach to the ends of the earth. And then we have this in Isaiah. He tends his flock like a shepherd. He gathers the lambs in his arms and carries them close to his heart. He gently leads those that have young. Now, pop quiz, one question, pass, fail. What were they waiting for? A shepherd. John got it right on behalf of everyone, so 5,000 points for everybody. They were waiting for a shepherd. And when Jesus arrived, well, let's look at what they got. Well, a shepherd. Before we get into that, I should talk a little bit about shepherds because that's what I intended to do and I forgot for a moment. Shepherds had sort of a very complicated history in Israel and in the minds of folks in the lives of the first century people in Israel. On the one hand, shepherds had a high-level symbolic and religious meaning. Abraham had been a shepherd. David, their greatest king, had been a shepherd. The prophecies of the Messiah referred to him as a shepherd, God's shepherd. There are elements in the Old Testament and Hebrew Scriptures in which God is referred to as a shepherd. So that notion of shepherd had a very high religious symbolic value to it. The life of actual shepherds, though, not so much. It's believed at this point in the history of Israel at the time that Jesus was born that shepherds were not really very respected or considered very respectable in that part of the world at that time. There was a sense perhaps that they were untrustworthy. They were likely, not very clean. They lived when it was grazing time, they lived out in the fields with their flocks. That's a good way to get dirty and smelly. And that's what they did. It was considered a low status job. There was not a lot of respect that went along with it, and there was at times a lot of disdain that went along with it. And there's some scholars that suggest that because the shepherds were living out in the fields with their flocks and were not able to participate in the regular worship life of the temple and of the people, that they were considered less spiritual, less holy, less clean and sanctified before God. And so shepherd as a symbolic thing was great. Shepherd as a practical thing was a low status thing. No one in that era ever said, boy, I hope my child grows up to be a shepherd. And the expectation of the Messiah being a shepherd was complicated by all of those things, by this notion of high religious value but low practical status. And so when Jesus showed up, he kind of did the best of all of it and embraced the full meaning of the concept of shepherd in that time and in that age. So when Jesus, what they got was this. Therefore Jesus said, this is not a Christmas reading in the sense this isn't the birth of Jesus. This is later in the life of Jesus, Jesus having a discussion, saying these things about himself as he's talking to his followers and other people that were present, both friends and enemies. Therefore Jesus said again, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. This notion of a sheep gate is the literal thing. Sheep were often stabled, barned, not in wooden buildings, but in caves. And the shepherd would literally lie down at the mouth of the gate, or at the mouth of the cave, and was the gate. He put himself literally between the sheep and thieves, robbers, wild animals, anyone that would come to steal, kill, and destroy. And Jesus is saying, this is who I am. I am the gate for the sheep. And he went on, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I'm the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep, I have other sheep that are not of this pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there will be one flock, and there will be one shepherd. He's not just a shepherd. When Jesus came, he was a shepherd. He was the good shepherd. He was the good shepherd who laid down his life for his sheep. The hired hand was watching sheep for pay. They were there to earn money. Not a bad thing. We need money. We all need to earn some money. We all need to live. That's not a bad thing. But, I would hope that are any sheep ranchers do we have any sheep ranchers in the building? I don't think, I'm not a sheep rancher. I'm sure there are sheep ranchers in the world. I would hope that any honest, ethical, moral sheep rancher would tell the people watching his or her sheep that if someone comes with guns and knives or wild animals come to kill and you can't stop them, don't die to save my sheep. I would hope any good sheep rancher would say that. But Jesus is saying, I'm not in this for the money. I'm not here because what I can get out of it. I'm here because I love the sheep. And so I'm not getting out of the way of the wild animals that are coming to kill. I'm not getting out of the way of the thieves that are coming to steal. I'm putting myself between those folks, those things, and the sheep. I'm laying down my life for the sheep in a very, very literal way. That's what Jesus was doing. This is in line in spirit as well as in genetic descent from David himself, who when he was shepherding the sheep of his family and bears came and lions came, he didn't run away, he didn't leave the sheep behind. He took on the bear, he took on the lion, and with the help of God destroyed them. Jesus is saying, even if I'm the one destroyed, I'm not getting out of the way. Going a step beyond where even David was. Not just a shepherd, but a good shepherd. protecting and defending his sheep, providing for his sheep, giving his life to his sheep, and giving full life to his sheep, giving his life for the sheep, laying down his life for the sheep, and giving full life to the sheep. And he's got sheep in other places besides New Beginnings, other places besides Pomeroy, other places besides Meigs County in Ohio, other places besides the United States. God has got sheep. Jesus has sheep all over the world. People of every skin color, every tongue, tribe, and nation, every language, every nationality, every background, every cultural background. There are folks who are sheep of Jesus. And he wants to bring them all in. And he lays down his life for all of them. He provides full life for all of them, is his promise. So what are we waiting for? The simple fact is Christmas was established as a celebration in the church. The Easter was always the bigger one. For hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years was the primary celebration of the church. The church didn't even really celebrate the birth of Jesus until a few hundred years after the resurrection of Jesus. And when the celebration of Jesus' birth was established, it was done as much to look ahead as it was to look back. It was remembering that people were waiting for the coming of the Messiah for the first time, and we know now that Messiah came, Messiah lived, Messiah died, Messiah rose again and ascended into the heavens, and now we're waiting again. Just like people were waiting before for Messiah to come, now we're waiting for the Messiah to return. And what are we waiting for? What are we waiting for? One of the things, again, if you want to go back and listen to the other sermons, you can do that, or re-listen to them, that's cool. I haven't really emphasized this about it, but the fact is that a lot of the prophecies that were made about who the Messiah was and what the Messiah would do have not been fulfilled. Jesus, as the Good Shepherd, has not yet provided full and abundant life for all of his sheep. A lot of Jesus' followers live and die in isolation and abject poverty with tremendous suffering, or watching those they love suffer in tremendous ways. Jesus is not yet fulfilled all of the prophecies that are made about him. And so one of the things that we're waiting for as we're waiting for Jesus, well, we're going to go back and look at one of those big prophecies about Jesus as shepherd, Messiah as shepherd. This is in Isaiah. I will place over them one shepherd. This is God talking. My servant David, again referencing from the lineage of David. He will tend them. He will tend them and be their shepherd. I, the Lord, will be their God, and my servant David will be prince among them. I, the Lord, have spoken. I will make a covenant of peace with them. We're waiting for peace. There's so much war, there's so much violence, there's so much hostility, there's so much anxiety, there's so much fear, there's so much separation, there's so much division, there's so much uncertainty in this world that try as we might, we cannot force or enforce peace upon the world around. We can't even enforce it on ourselves most of the time, much less force other people to live in peace. We're waiting for Jesus to establish peace with them, and rid the land of savage beasts. There's so much violence, there's so much death, there's so much destruction, there's so many different threats from different angles and different spots and different places and different fears and things, to where so many forces out there that want to steal, kill, and destroy. And we're waiting for Jesus to rid the land of those threats, so that they may live in the wilderness and sleep in the forests in safety. I will make them and the places surrounding my hill a blessing. I love this. One of the things we're waiting for is for Jesus to really make us, his followers, a blessing to the whole world. Tragically, throughout the history of the church, we have often been worse, far less than a blessing, and sometimes a downright pain and curse on people around the world. And we're waiting for Jesus to make us truly a blessing for people of the world. I will send down showers in season. There will be showers of blessings. There's a hymn about that, I think, Ann, but I don't think we're singing that one tonight. The trees will yield their fruit. The ground will yield its crops. The people will be secure in their land. They will know that I am the Lord when I break the bars of their yoke and rescue them from the hands of those who have enslaved them. Freedom for the oppressed and the enslaved. They will no longer be plundered by the nations, nor will their animals devour them. They will live in safety, and no one will make them afraid. I will provide for them a land renowned for its crops, They will no longer be victims of famine in the land of bear or the scorn. My eyes go bad late in the evening. Victim of famine in the land, or bear the score of the nations. Yeah, not victim of bears. My brain does weird things too. Then, safety, prosperity, security, freedom from threat, freedom from anxiety, freedom from all forms of oppression and scorn. Then they will know that I, the Lord, am their God. That I, the Lord their God, am with them, and that they, the Israelites, are my people, declares the sovereign Lord. You are my sheep, the sheep of my pasture, and I am your God, declares the sovereign Lord. Ezekiel. I said Isaiah at the beginning of that because, again, my brain does weird things. This is what we're waiting for. We're waiting for Jesus to finish the job, to establish the kingdom, which he began so many years ago. A kingdom in which people will be a blessing to one another and not a curse. A kingdom in which everyone will have enough to eat. A kingdom in which everyone can lie down in safety and security at night, not having to fear threats from outside the home or inside the home, from outside the country or inside the country. We're waiting for a kingdom in which no one suffers from scorn or derision or shame or humiliation or degradation, where no one is enslaved to another person and no one is enslaved to bad memories, bad experiences, bad thoughts. No one is enslaved to any of those things. That's what we're waiting for our shepherd to establish that in us and among us. So the question we need to ask is, what do we do while we're waiting? While we're waiting for Jesus to do all of this, what do we need to be doing? One more scripture. Jesus said this at the very end. After his resurrection, meeting with Peter, he had this conversation. This is part of the conversation. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said. "You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." Again, Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep." The third time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, "Do you love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Take care of..." Oh, I did that. It didn't advance. I started that slide again. "Do you love me?" He said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." What we do while we're waiting is, to the best of our ability and our capacity, we continue to do the work that Jesus was doing, of tending, caring, feeding, securing, providing for, nurturing the sheep all around us. Now, we'll never do what Jesus did. We're not, he was God in the flesh. He's beyond us. But we can, in our capacity, be like, apprentice shepherds, working under the authority of the good shepherd, not to rule over others, but to care for them. I was searching my brain for a good example of this, because I wanted like a real live, actual example of this. And I thought of some folks today that I have not thought of for years. I knew them many years ago in another city in another part of the state. And I'm going to call them Cheryl and Tony. It's not their names. Cheryl had a lifelong struggle with severe mental illness. Diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic early in her life. Had suffered greatly from her disease until she began to get the right medication to treat it and to care for it. And then sometimes she would go off of it and things would go really, really bad, and things were very embarrassing, very difficult, very humiliating, and very painful for her. When I knew her, she was on her medication, but the nature of her medication and the nature of her illness made her completely unable to hold a job anywhere doing anything. She was a shepherd. She was a shepherd to Tony. who was young enough to be your son. When I knew Cheryl, I thought she was old. She was younger than I am now, but she seemed old to me then. Tony was young enough to be her son, an adult who had suffered a traumatic brain injury that left him completely unemployable. And half of his body didn't function right, and he couldn't move his arm properly, and he couldn't move his leg properly. And he would have very difficult times with his mental function. And both Cheryl and Tony lived on government assistance and government support, which meant that they lived very, very spare, impoverished lives. Cheryl did have an old beater car that she was able to maintain, and she took care of Tony. She welcomed him into her house whenever he needed a place to stay. She took him to his doctor's appointments. She made sure that he got his medicines on time. She advocated for him when he couldn't get the treatment that she knew he needed because he couldn't afford it, or because he couldn't manage, or because he couldn't advocate for himself. She shepherded that young man with all that she had. And neither of them was perfect, folks. But if Cheryl can be a shepherd in her situation and shelter and care for and provide security and safety and sanctuary and dignity in her situation, if she could do that for another, then we all can. We all can. And the simple fact is that the blessing went both ways. Because Cheryl, with all of her problems and all of her struggles, she was a person of intelligence, she was a person of determination. But because of her particular challenges, there were a lot of things that she couldn't do. But shepherding Tony and loving him and caring for him and providing for him and tending him gave her purpose, allowed her to be important in someone else's life. And this is what Jesus calls us to. This is what we need to be about while we're waiting for Jesus to return, is shepherding and caring for and tending those around us to our capacity. To our capacity. Now, I was going to tell a story here. I can't remember I don't have any idea what time it is. Do I have time for the story? I have time for the story. It's not a long story. And this story really, I think, takes us to a next step in this whole conversation of what are we waiting for and what are we expecting. This is a once upon a time story. Once upon a time, there was a man who was very wealthy, very influential, and it wasn't his profession, but it was his hobby to collect fine art. And he was quite an expert as a non-professional in that field, and he developed an extravagantly amazing art collection. He raised his son and taught his son all about the fine arts as well, but his son decided to go a different route. He became a nurse, and the world went to war, and he was drafted, and he found himself working as a medic. Just a few months after he went to war, his father got the notice that his son had been killed, acting as a medic, working to save in the field the life of other soldiers, and one in particular. He was in the process of rescuing when he was killed. Now, the father got that news, and his life seemed to shut down. And he spent most of that year in depression and darkness and in despair. But that following Christmas, as he was not celebrating at all, but sitting alone in his home, in his big mansion, surrounded by his fabulous works of art, there was a knock at the door, and he opened it, and there was a man there on a cane, and he was a soldier. And he said, "Hello, sir. I wanted to introduce myself because I'm the man who your son was saving when he was killed." And he came into the house, and he shared the stories about the many, many, many people that the son had saved before he was finally killed by that bullet. And as their conversation neared an end, the soldier very sheepishly pulled out a tube and opened it up and unrolled a beautiful canvas painting. And the man said, the soldier said, I'm an artist, and I painted this portrait of your son, and I wanted to give it to you as a Christmas gift. And the father was overwhelmed. The image of his son was striking. Now, he was an expert in these areas, and he knew that this was not a masterpiece, this was not a work of genius, but it very quickly became the dearest piece of art that he owned. He had it framed, and he put it in a place of honor above the mantelpiece, and he cleared out masterpieces of world-renowned artists to make space for this portrait of his son. And every day he would sit and look at it and remember. And the more he remembered and the more he thought of all of those men his son had saved, the more at peace he became. Until finally he was at peace. But then he contracted pneumonia. And within a few months, he had passed. He had arranged things with his attorney and established his will, though, before he died. And he set the following Christmas Day to be an auction for all of his artwork. People from all over the world were there. Collectors, museums, personal collectors, private collectors, museums, academic institutions. They were coming hoping to be able to buy one of these amazing works of art from these world-renowned artists. And at last the auction began. The auctioneer stood up, and he began with the portrait of the old man's son. And he said, "Who will give me $100 for this? Who will give me $100? And no one was interested. No one came for that. They wanted the stuff, the big stuff by the big guys, the real renowned artists. They wanted the masterpieces, not this. And no one was responding. No one was answering. Finally, one man raised his hand and said, I was a friend of the old man, and I knew his son. And I didn't think I was going to be able to afford to buy anything here anyway, but I'll give you $100 for that painting." The auctioneer said, "Going once, going twice, sold." And then someone from the back shouted, "Now we can get on to the good stuff." But the auctioneer put the papers back in his briefcase and closed his briefcase and said into the microphone, "That concludes our auction for the day." And the people said, "What do you mean? No one came here to buy the portrait of the son. We want the masterpieces." And the auctioneer said, "You don't understand." In his will, the father said, "Whoever gets the son gets it all." Whoever gets the son gets it all. When we get the son, we get the shepherd. We get the hope of peace. We get the hope of joy. We get the hope of safety and security. We get the hope of life eternal and the promise. And when it comes to Jesus, it's like hoping for the sunrise. It's not hope. It's not like my wishful thinking that every year I wanted, this really, really, really big, expensive toy that I didn't get at Christmas. It was the hope of something that is promised and secure and certain. And this is the hope that we have in Jesus. Whoever gets the Son gets it all. Receive Jesus as our good shepherd. Give thanks for his gift, and as much as we are able, love Jesus by caring for his sheep. This is what we're called to do and called to be while we're waiting for Jesus to return, waiting for our good shepherd.